I guess the most extreme abuse that I would have had would have started maybe at the beginning of my career, whenever I'd written one particular article about transgender rights a couple of years ago. It was an article for the Telegraph, and I was quite surprised at the amount of backlash or abuse that I got online. And in particular, one person on Twitter had sent me an image of someone that they said was a woman who'd been raped and killed, a transgender woman who'd been raped and killed, and saying that the same thing should happen to me. And that was very disturbing to see, because obviously you don't know what messages people will send you, and just to get that image, and there's no way you can kind of screen that, and it was quite obviously upsetting and disturbing to see. And then to have someone saying directly that that this should happen to you next was obviously very upsetting, and I'd never kind of experienced anything like that before. I guess people wouldn't come up to you in the street normally and kind of say something as shocking as that, whereas online someone was able just to do that directly with no kind of screening or anything involved. It was very, very upsetting. I mentioned to a few of my friends at the time just for support, but and it didn't occur to me to report it to Twitter itself, because I know of other female journalists who've had experience of abuse online, and that they, whenever they've reported things, that they almost invariably don't get a positive response, and the material tends to stay up. So I thought, rather than kind of getting embroiled in a kind of a long complaints process, it would be better just to kind of just put it out of my mind and try and ignore it. Yeah, and I think that's sorry. Yeah. I think being a freelance journalist as well, there's a further issue where because you're not necessarily employed by one specific company, or you don't have a contract with them, there isn't a HR or a human resources department that you can report things to. And because, as we know, women are more likely to be freelance journalists, they're less likely to be in stable contracted employment across all sectors, not just journalism. The fact that there aren't policies in place where you mightn't have one specific employer or human resources to contact, I think is definitely a specific gender issue which will affect women and girls more. I think there's definitely a difference in the abuse that I face as a female journalist compared to male journalists, because whenever I've explained my experiences to men in different offices I've worked at, they're always completely stunned that they will have never received any sexual comments or remarks. It wouldn't occur to them when they go and present a video on constitutional law that someone's going to comment on the size of their genitals or anything else, or in any way make any threat of violence against them. And it's something which, I guess, from the perspective of having male privilege, it just doesn't occur to them. Whereas for women, it's something that you have to think about all the time whenever you're in the kind of being in any way kind of a public facing role, that people will make comments and derogatory remarks about you, which men just never have to worry about them being victimised in that way. As a journalist, there's also that also influences my decision to kind of stay on Twitter or having a work Facebook page, because you do need to have a platform to be able to share your work. And I think particularly as a freelance journalist, there isn't one newspaper which publishes my writing, so it's not, can't just say to readers, oh, this is the one place to find my work, whereas it'll be more people will turn to my Twitter or Facebook account to see my most recent articles. And so if for women, particularly freelance journalists, if you do kind of disengage from social media, it does mean that people won't read your work as much, and you're not able to kind of build up as much of a readership. And so it can leave you in a difficult situation, because you do rely on a lot of these platforms for work, but not in a traditional sense of it being part of your job. Whereas if you work for a company, and then you can kind of put direct complaints to your employer, whereas Twitter, I guess, is involved in so many of our so much of what women do, female journalists, in terms of being not quite an employer but a very important part of our work, whereas we don't have any mechanism really of holding them to account in the way that you would maybe traditionally before social media.